I had to serve my own daughter with an eviction notice for the house I built for her. Not a house I bought, a house I built, with my own two hands on land that had been in my family for 3 generations. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and also the most necessary. People say that a parent's love is unconditional, but they're wrong. Love might be, but tolerance for profound disrespect is not. My name is Arthur, and this is the story of how my kindness was mistaken for a doormat, and how I finally decided to stand up. For 40 years, I worked as a master carpenter and eventually a custom home builder. I never got rich in the flashy sense, but I was comfortable. I provided a good life for my late wife, Sarah, and our only child, Clara. I built our family home, a sturdy, warm place filled with the scent of sawdust and Sarah's baking. When Sarah passed from cancer 10 years ago, a part of me went with her. All I had left was Clara. I poured every ounce of my remaining love and energy into her. I made sure she never wanted for anything. College, a new car when she graduated, a generous allowance so she could find her passion without worrying about rent. I thought I was being a good father. In hindsight, I was creating a monster of entitlement. She met Mark about 5 years ago. He was slick, charming, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He worked in finance, a vague term for what I later learned was a junior position at a small firm, a firm I would come to know much more intimately. He came from a family that valued appearances above all else. His parents, David and Eleanor, were the type of people who would lease a luxury car they couldn't afford and then complain about the price of organic milk. They saw me as a simple tradesman, a relic from a bygone era. They'd pat me on the arm at family dinners and call me salt of the earth, a phrase that always felt like a polite way of calling me poor and uneducated. When Clara and Mark announced their engagement, I was happy for her, if not for him. I wanted her to have a solid foundation, a place to build her own life. That's when I decided to give her the greatest gift I could imagine. On the 5 acres of land behind my own home, a beautiful plot with old-growth oak trees and a view of the valley, I would build her house. Her dream house. We spent months on the design. Clara wanted a modern villa, all glass and clean lines, a stark contrast to my own rustic home. I spent a year of my life pouring my heart and soul into that structure. I called in favors, used the best materials, and oversaw every single detail myself, from the foundation to the last coat of paint. It was a masterpiece, a testament to my love for her. At their wedding, I handed her a beautifully calligraphed card. Inside was the deed. The house, the physical structure itself, was now legally hers. Clara wept. Mark clapped me on the back with a little too much force, and his parents looked on with avaricious gleams in their eyes. For a year, things seemed perfect. Clara would send me pictures of her decorating, of the garden she was planting. I'd walk over sometimes, unannounced, and she'd always seem happy to see me, offering me a glass of iced tea as I admired my own handiwork. The house was a bridge between us. The inciting incident, the moment the first crack appeared in the foundation of our relationship, happened on a Sunday. It was my late wife's birthday, a day that was always difficult for me. Clara had invited me over for dinner. When I arrived, Mark's parents, David and Eleanor, were already there, their car parked possessively in the driveway. This was unusual. They rarely visited when I was there, preferring to maintain a polite distance. We sat in the sprawling, open-plan living room, a space designed for light and warmth. The atmosphere, however, was cold and formal. After some awkward small talk, David cleared his throat, standing as if to make a grand proclamation. "Arthur," he began, using my first name with a familiarity he hadn't earned, "Eleanor and I have some wonderful news. We decided to sell our home in the city. The market is just too good to pass up." I nodded politely. "That's great, David. Are you planning on downsizing?" Eleanor let out a tinkling, artificial laugh. "Oh, heavens no. We're upgrading." In a manner of speaking, Clara, my daughter, shifted in her seat, refusing to meet my eyes. That was the first alarm bell. Mark placed a hand on her knee, a gesture of control, not comfort. He was the one who spoke next. "What Eleanor means, Arthur, is that we've all had a long talk about the future. It just makes sense, you know? for family to stick together. So, Clara and I have made a generous offer. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. I looked at my daughter, my sweet Clara, but her face was a mask of strained neutrality. We've invited Mom and Dad to move in here with us, Mark announced, beaming as if he'd just solved world hunger. This house is so big, it's practically a waste for just 2 people. They'll take the guest wing. It'll be one big, happy family. The silence in the room was deafening. The ticking of the large minimalist clock on the wall sounded like hammer blows. I stared at them, trying to process the sheer audacity. They were talking about the house I built, my gift, my legacy. They spoke of it as if it were a hotel, a commodity to be parceled out. "You're moving them in?" I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. "Isn't it wonderful?" Eleanor chirped, oblivious. "We can help Clara with the house, be here for our future grandchildren. It's the perfect arrangement." I turned my gaze to Clara. "Clara, you agreed to this." She finally looked at me, her expression a cocktail of guilt and defiance. "Dad, it's my house. We can decide who lives here. It's a practical decision. They'll be selling their house and investing the money into Mark's new business venture. It helps everyone. My house." She had said it. Not our house in the sense of her and Mark, but my house in a way that was meant to exclude me entirely. The gift I had given freely was now being used as a wall to shut me out. "This was a gift, Clara," I said, my voice low and steady. "A gift from me to you, for you to start your life with Mark. Not for this." David scoffed, a dismissive, ugly sound. "Oh, don't be so sentimental, Arthur. You gave her the house. It's hers. You don't get to control what she does with it. That's not how gifts work." The arrogance was breathtaking. The utter lack of gratitude, of perspective. They saw a building, an asset. I saw a piece of my heart, a monument to my dead wife and my love for our daughter. In that moment, something inside me broke. The deep, aching hurt was there, but beneath it, something else began to form. Something cold and hard and clear. I stood up. "I see," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Well, I wish you all the best with your new arrangement." I walked out of the house without another word. I didn't look back. As I walked the 100 yards back to my own home, the home Sarah and I had shared, the coldness spread through me, extinguishing the hurt and replacing it with a quiet, burning resolve. They had mistaken my generosity for weakness. They had mistaken my love for a blank check. They were about to learn, in painstaking detail, that actions have consequences. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, surrounded by the ghosts of my life. Pictures of Sarah, Clara's childhood drawings, my old blueprints. The grief I felt wasn't just for my wife anymore. It was for the daughter I thought I had. The daughter I had raised was gone, replaced by this cold, materialistic stranger. But as the sun began to rise, the grief receded, and the planner in me took over. The builder. The man who understood that before you can construct something new, you sometimes have to tear down the old. I went to my safe and pulled out a thick file. It was the portfolio for the villa. Inside were all the blueprints, the permits, the receipts. And tucked neatly at the back was the document they had never bothered to read properly. When I gifted the house to Clara, I did indeed sign over the deed to the physical structure. It was hers lock, stock, and barrel. But the land, the 5 acres of prime family land it was sitting on, was a different matter entirely. The land was owned by a holding company I had set up years ago, Oak Valley Properties, LLC. I had leased the land to the owner of the house, now Clara, for a period of 99 years for the symbolic price of $1 a year. It was a legal formality, a way to protect the ancestral land from being sold off on a whim or lost in a potential divorce. It was my one safety net, a string I had attached, not out of malice, but out of foresight. And buried deep within the boilerplate of that lease agreement was Clause 17, Section B. It was a standard provision I included in all my land leases. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that the property could not be sublet, nor could residency be transferred or extended to non-signatories for a period exceeding 90 days without the express written consent of the landowner. Oak Valley Properties, LLC. A violation of this clause constituted a material breach of the lease. A breach which, after a 30-day period to cure the defect, would render the entire lease null and void. They had announced their plan to move David and Eleanor in permanently. They were, in effect, publicly declaring their intention to breach the contract. My daughter and her smug husband had signed that lease agreement without reading it, blinded by the spectacle of a free mansion. Their arrogance was about to become their undoing. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man named Peterson who had handled my business affairs for 2 decades. I explained the situation calmly and clinically. I didn't speak of my hurt feelings or the family betrayal. I spoke of contracts and clauses, of breaches and remedies. Peterson listened patiently, and when I was done, there was a long pause on the line. "Arthur," he said finally, a note of grim respect in his voice. "You old fox. You planned for this." "I planned for a storm," I replied. "I just never thought it would come from inside the house." We spent the next week drafting the first letter. It was not from me, Arthur, the heartbroken father. It was from the legal department of Oak Valley Properties, LLC. It was addressed to Ms. Clara Miller and Mr. Mark Miller, residents. The language was cold, corporate, and brutally efficient. It cited Clause 17, Section B, of their land lease agreement. It noted our understanding that they intended to house 2 additional, unapproved long-term residents, Mr. David and Mrs. Eleanor Peterson. It informed them that this action would constitute a material breach of their lease. It gave them 30 days from the date of the letter to provide written confirmation that this plan would not proceed. Failure to do so would result in the termination of the lease agreement. We sent it via certified mail. I wanted the signature. I wanted proof they had received it. The execution of the plan had begun. But that was only the first pillar of my strategy. Tearing down their home wasn't enough. I had to dismantle the entire illusion of the life they had built on my quiet support. Mark's new business venture that Eleanor had mentioned, the one they were funding by selling their house. I knew all about it. Mark had pitched it to me months ago, some app for bespoke dog walking services. It was a flimsy idea, but Clara was so excited for him, so I agreed to provide the seed money. I set him up in a small office space I owned downtown and funded the business through one of my smaller investment corporations. He thought he was the CEO of a hot new startup. In reality, he was an employee in a business I owned, playing with my money. Phase 2 was the financial audit. I had my corporate accountant initiate a full, unscheduled audit of Mark's company. I knew what he'd find. Mark was sloppy. He used the company credit card for lavish dinners, weekend trips, and designer clothes. He was treating my investment as his personal slush fund. The unraveling started slowly, then all at once. About a week after they received the legal letter, Clara called me. Her tone was annoyed, not panicked. "Dad, what is this ridiculous letter? Are you trying to intimidate us? Mark's parents are moving in next month, and that's final. It's my house." "Clara," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "This is not a family matter. This is a legal matter between a landowner and a lessee. If you have concerns, your lawyer can contact the legal representative for Oak Valley Properties. His name is Mr. Peterson." I've recused myself from the discussion. The line went silent. I could hear her sputtering, confused by my detached, corporate tone. She was expecting an emotional argument, a shouting match. She was expecting the hurt father she could manipulate. She got a CEO instead. She hung up. A few days later, the second wave hit. The audit of Mark's company was complete. It was a disaster of mismanagement and minor fraud. My accountant delivered the report to Mark, along with a notice that all company credit cards were frozen pending an investigation into unauthorized expenditures. The generous salary he was paying himself was suspended. This time, Mark called me himself. The charming veneer was gone. He was furious. "What the hell are you doing, Arthur? You're trying to ruin me. This is my company." "Is it, Mark?" I asked quietly. "Read your employment contract, the one you signed when you accepted my investment. You're a divisional manager. I own the company, and I'm protecting my investment from an employee who seems to think company funds are his personal piggy bank." He started yelling, cursing, threatening. I let him go on for a minute before I interrupted. "Mark, This conversation is unproductive. You'll be hearing from my HR department regarding a formal disciplinary meeting. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. The next domino to fall was their cars. Two brand new luxury SUVs, both purchased with loans that I had co-signed for to get them a better interest rate. A provision of my co-signing was that I be listed as a lien holder. One phone call to the bank explaining that I was withdrawing my financial backing due to unrelated fraudulent activities by the primary borrower was all it took. The bank, protecting its own interests, immediately triggered a repossession clause. 2 days later, a tow truck showed up at the villa and hauled both of their expensive cars away. I watched from my porch, sipping my morning coffee. The panic calls became a flood. Clara was crying, hysterical now. Dad, they took our cars. We can't get to work. Mark lost his company card. What is happening? Actions have consequences, Clara, I said, the phrase becoming my mantra. You and Mark have made a series of choices. You are now experiencing the results of those choices. What choices? She shrieked. Because we wanted to help Mark's parents? Because we wanted to be a family? No, I said, the coldness in my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Because you chose ingratitude. You chose disrespect. You took a gift I poured my soul into and treated it like a bargaining chip. You stood by while your husband and his family insulted me in a house built on my family's land. You chose them over me. So now, you get to live with them and all that entails. The 30-day notice period on the lease violation expired. They had not responded in writing. They had been too busy dealing with the collapse of their financial house of cards to pay attention to the foundation that was about to be ripped out from under them. Peterson filed the eviction paperwork with the court. It was granted without issue, as the breach of contract was clear and undisputed. A uniformed sheriff's deputy served the official eviction notice the following Tuesday. He knocked on the door of the beautiful glass villa, and I can only imagine the look on Clara's face when she was handed a legal order to vacate the premises within 60 days. That evening, they came. Not just Clara and Mark, but David and Eleanor too. All four of them stormed up to my front door and hammered on it until I opened it. They looked ragged, their expensive clothes seeming out of place on their strained, furious faces. What have you done? Clara screamed, tears streaming down her face. She held up the crumpled eviction notice. You're throwing me out? Your own daughter? He's a monster. Eleanor shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. A vindictive old man. All because we wanted to live with our son. Mark and David just stood behind them, their faces dark with impotent rage. I let them vent. I let them scream and cry and accuse me of every sin imaginable. I stood there, framed in the doorway of the home I had built for my wife, and I felt nothing but a profound, weary sadness. When their initial fury was spent, I spoke, my voice quiet but carrying over their ragged breaths. This is not my doing, I began. This is your doing. Every single step of this was a result of a choice you made. I looked at Clara. You chose to disrespect the single greatest gift I have ever given you. You chose to treat my love as a transaction that was complete, with no further obligation of gratitude or respect. You stood there silently while your new family planned to colonize my legacy. I turned to Mark. You chose to see me not as a father-in-law, but as a bank. You took my money, my support, and my trust, and you used it to fund a lifestyle of deceit. You thought my generosity was stupidity. You were wrong. Then I looked at David and Eleanor. And you, I said, my voice dropping lower. You chose to see my life's work as nothing more than a convenient retirement home. You mocked my profession and my values, all while planning to live off the fruits of my labor. You were the architects of your own homelessness. The silence was thick with their shock. They had expected a fight, but they were getting a lecture, a final, damning judgment. You are being evicted from the land, not the house. I continued, letting the full, ironic weight of the situation settle on them. The house, the physical structure, is still legally yours, Clara, as per the deed of gift. So you have a choice. You have 60 days to vacate my land. You can take the house with you. Their jaws dropped. The sheer absurdity of it, the poetic justice, was lost on them. They just saw the impossibility. Move the house. Mark stammered. Are you insane? That would cost a fortune. We have no money. Indeed, I said with a slight, sad smile. That is the consequence you have earned. You wanted the house without the foundation of respect it was built on. So now you have it. A hollow shell with no ground to support it. A perfect metaphor for the life you tried to build. I stepped back and made to close the door. My lawyer has all the details, I said. Do not contact me again. This is no longer a family matter. I shut the door on their stunned faces. The next 60 days were a spectacle of their downfall. They couldn't afford a lawyer to fight the eviction, not a good one anyway. They couldn't afford to move the house. They couldn't afford anything. Mark's parents' house had already sold, and the new owners were moving in. They were trapped. In the end, they had to declare bankruptcy. Mark's company was dissolved. They lost everything. The villa, my beautiful villa, was declared an asset in the bankruptcy. Because it had to be removed from my land, its value was assessed at a fraction of its worth. Basically, the cost of materials. It was sold at auction for pennies on the dollar to a salvage company that disassembled it for parts. I watched them take it apart piece by piece. The great glass walls, the custom cabinetry, the beautiful hardwood floors I had installed myself. It was painful, like watching a memory being dismantled, but it was also a cleansing. The last I heard, Clara, Mark, and his parents were all living together in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment they rented on the other side of town. Mark got a job in a call center. Clara was working as a cashier. The grand life they had envisioned was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of their own making. She tried calling a few times, leaving tearful, rambling voicemails. I never listened to them. The daughter I knew was gone, and the woman she had become was a stranger to me. The land is empty now. The foundation of the villa is still there, a concrete scar on the earth. For a while, I thought about building something new on it, but I've decided against it. Instead, I started planting a garden. An oak tree for Sarah. A patch of wildflowers. It's quiet here. Peaceful. The land is healing, and so am I. Love, I've learned, must be a two-way street. It requires respect. It requires gratitude. When those things die, you aren't obligated to keep watering the dead plant. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to pull it out by the roots and plant something new in its place. It's a hard lesson, but it's a true one. And it's a piece I wouldn't trade for anything. Actions, after all, always have consequences.